Big U has always denied having any role in Nipsey's murder.
They're like, why the f they blame me? Because it just didn't make sense to me.
But now, a leaked recording has surfaced that doesn't just involve Big U, it drags Snoop Dogg into it too. Fans believe they low-key admitted to putting the hit in motion. With this new twist, Nipsey's case might actually get reopened. Let me break it down. Big U and Snoop caught on tape. They had no idea the cameras were rolling. Two of the most powerful figures in West Coast hip-hop, Big U and Snoop Dogg, sat together, speaking freely, not realizing their words would soon spark one of the darkest conspiracy theories in rap history. Because according to people who've seen the footage, what went down wasn't just casual conversation. It wasn't just reminiscing about the streets or sharing industry gossip. No, what we're talking about here is way more sinister. We're talking about the alleged planning of a murder, Nipsey Hussle's murder. And the most chilling part? It wasn't random whispers on a street corner. It was supposedly caught on tape. Now, before we even begin, let me make one thing clear. When this kind of claim surfaces, it shakes the foundation of everything you thought you knew. Because Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another rapper, he was a leader, a businessman, a community builder. He had a vision for Crenshaw, for South Central, for black ownership that threatened the old ways of doing business in Los Angeles. And that vision, according to many, made him a target. So what exactly was captured in that hidden footage? And why are so many convinced that Big U and Snoop Dogg knew far more than they ever admitted? Let's set the stage. Big U, Eugene Henley, was no small player in the streets of LA. He wasn't just another name you heard in passing. This was a man who helped shape the very environment that birthed Nipsey. He grew up immersed in gang culture, learned martial arts and boxing, and by his own admission, developed a reputation in the streets for violence, drugs, and survival.
I got involved in the gang life. I took martial arts since I was a kid, martial art and boxing, so that kind of gave us gave me a different outlook in life. And I think as I got older, I started, and we got more into the streets.
This was the man who later took Nipsey under his wing. He wasn't just some distant figure. Nipsey actually lived with him. Big U housed him, fed him, funded his early career, and taught him about business and property ownership. Nipsey was family. So how does someone go from being a mentor, a so-called protector, to being accused of orchestrating his death? That's where the contradictions begin to pile up. See, when Nipsey Hussle was killed outside his Marathon clothing store in March 2019, the official narrative was simple. Eric Holder, aka Shitty Cuz, pulled the trigger after a heated argument. Case closed, but the streets didn't buy it, because within hours of Nipsey's death, whispers started circulating that Big U was involved. It sounds crazy, right? But the rumors spread like wildfire, and Big U himself admitted that the suspicion hit him like a ton of bricks. In one interview, he recalled how Suge Knight called him just 2 days after Nipsey's death with a chilling warning.
It was hard on my family more than anything. Let me tell you what's crazy. I think 2 days after he was killed, Suge called me. And Suge said, get ready. And I'm like, get ready for what? And he was like, because they're going to blame you.
Think about that. Suge Knight, a man who has seen more than his fair share of bloodshed in hip-hop, instantly knew how this story would play out. He predicted Big U would take the blame, even before the internet had a chance to connect the dots. And sure enough, Big U says he watched in disbelief as people chopped up his interviews, twisted his words, and built entire platforms off the idea that he had set Nipsey up. But here's the thing, when you look at the timeline, when you really dig into what people close to Nipsey have said, it doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. Take the testimony of rapper Loose Cannon. He went public with a shocking claim that Big U called him to say Nipsey had been killed 30 minutes before it actually happened. Let that sink in.
Thought Big U gave wrong information. 30 minutes later, the homies blowing me up like they just killed Nipsey. And so I'm like...
Wait. You get a call from Big U telling you Nipsey just got killed.
Yeah.
You panic, called Nip. Nip answered the phone.
Yeah.
According to Loose Cannon, Big U told him Nipsey was dead when, in reality, Nipsey was still alive, even answering phone calls. How do you explain that? Was it just a bizarre coincidence, a misunderstanding? Or was it proof that someone knew what was about to go down? That single detail, a phone call made too early, is what keeps this conspiracy alive. And then, of course, there's Snoop Dogg, the West Coast icon who mourned Nipsey publicly, who called him one of the hardest losses for the culture.
West Coast has had some tough losses. I mean, Kobe, Pac, Nipsey. Is there anyone particularly that stands out to you as kind of the hardest one of those to swallow?
I'd probably say, Nipsey and Nate Dogg.
But behind the scenes, Snoop's name has been tied into this mess too. Why? Because of his close ties to both Nipsey and Big U. Snoop was there when Nipsey was rising. He worked with Big U, and conspiracy theorists argue that his silence on the rumors has only made things look more suspicious. If you think that's reaching, just remember, in Los Angeles, silence speaks volumes. And yet, when Big U talks about the details of Nipsey's murder, even he seems to poke holes in the official story. He questions the idea that Eric Holder acted alone, that it was just a simple beef gone wrong.
The hit didn't make sense to me because who takes this girl on a hit? And who goes, if you're going to go do a hit, if it is a hit, if you're going to go do a hit, who goes to confront the guy? He already know, I'm finna do this dude. Who goes to confront the guy, leave, and then come back?
No.
Does that sound like someone denying rumors? Or does it sound like someone who knows more than they're willing to admit? Now here's why you should care. Because Nipsey Hussle's death wasn't just the loss of an artist. It was the loss of a visionary who was building something far bigger than music. He was buying property in his own neighborhood. He was creating jobs, opportunities, and hope in a place that had long been left behind. And if you believe the conspiracy, that's exactly why he was targeted. Because his success didn't just make him rich, it made him powerful. And in a city like Los Angeles, power is dangerous. Power disrupts the old order. Power makes enemies. So when people say Big U and Snoop Dogg were caught on film discussing Nipsey's future, the million-dollar question becomes, what exactly were they planning? Were they discussing business moves or something far darker? The answers lie in the contradictions, the strange timing of phone calls, the early warnings, and the constant attempts to downplay the rumors. And in the next part, we're going to dive even deeper into the messy history between Nipsey and Big U, the conflicts, the falling outs, the money disputes, and the unanswered questions that all point toward a motive that no one wants to admit. Because make no mistake, this story isn't just about one murder. It's about the system of power, money, and silence that surrounds hip-hop at its highest levels. How Nipsey Hussle's bond with Big U turned into betrayal. The story doesn't end with whispers or conspiracy theories. If anything, it gets darker the closer you look, because the bond between Nipsey Hussle and Big U wasn't just about mentorship and family ties. It was complicated, filled with loyalty, betrayal, business conflicts, and scars that never fully healed. See, to understand why people believe Big U might have played a role, or at the very least had knowledge, you need to look at the cracks in their relationship. These weren't just minor disagreements. They were conflicts about money, image, and control, and those cracks grew wider over time. Let's rewind to the mid-2000s. Nipsey was young, ambitious, and hungry. And Big U, he had just come home from prison and was trying to make his mark in the music industry. That's when the two linked up. Nipsey, still raw but undeniably talented, caught Big U's attention. And at first, everything looked like a perfect match. Big U had the connections, the resources, and the streets behind him. Nipsey had the charisma, the vision, and the authenticity that labels couldn't resist.
Yeah, I met Nip 2007, 2006, 2007. It was shortly after I came home. When Corrupt left Death Row to go back to do the Dogg Pound, that's when I started looking for, I left and started looking for another artist. That's when I started looking for Nipsey.
Big U even let Nipsey live in his condo, setting him up with studio equipment and guiding him as he developed his music. Nip wasn't just an artist to him, he was almost like a son. But here's where things start to get complicated. According to Big U, from the very beginning, there were conflicts. Nipsey was making moves that Big U didn't always know about. There were mixtapes, deals, and projects that slipped through the cracks, creating friction and mistrust.
Nip had a mixtape we didn't know nothing about, that he had did some other stuff. So we started finding a lot of stuff later on. It was kind of like making conflicts.
That might not sound like much, but in the music industry, and especially in the streets, communication is everything. If someone feels left out of the loop, it's not just a business mistake, it's disrespect. And disrespect, in the world these men came from, often leads to consequences. And then there's the shadow of Suge Knight. Big U admitted that his ties to Suge made it harder for Nipsey to break through in the industry. Labels didn't want to deal with him because of Suge's reputation. That created tension, because while Nipsey was trying to build a career, the people backing him were already carrying baggage that scared off potential partners.
It was a lot of backlash from my relationship with Suge in the industry. Not pretty much the people didn't know who I was. It was kind of like, you know, who I am, who I was, and then is Suge gonna come through the door next?
For Nipsey, that meant fewer opportunities, slower progress, and a harder road. For Big U, it meant feeling like his reputation was being weaponized against him, even when he was trying to help. But here's the real kicker. As Nipsey rose, he began to outgrow the people who once protected him. At first, he needed Big U, but as the deals started coming in, as his name started buzzing, Nipsey began carving out his own identity, one that didn't necessarily rely on Big U's guidance. And that's where the resentment allegedly began to grow. You can see it in the way Big U talks about influence. He claims he pushed Nipsey to move away from gang talk and into more conscious, money-focused music.
I've always been black conscious. When I came home, I was already, we're not doing no color lines. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want music that was disrespecting people. I went through all of our videos. I went through all of the songs, and I made sure that we did not disrespect other set.
It's almost like Big U wanted credit for shaping Nipsey's message, for molding him into something greater. And while there's no denying his influence, Nipsey's vision was always his own. So the question becomes, when an artist starts to shine brighter than the people who helped him, what happens to those relationships? Do they adapt, or do they collapse under the weight of pride? Fast forward a few years, and Nipsey's career was skyrocketing. He was doing interviews, getting recognition, and building the Marathon brand. And at the same time, his relationship with Big U was reportedly cooling. Loose Cannon described their bond as unstable. Hot one minute, cold the next. That's not just business tension, that's personal.
Their relationship was so up. It'd be like they be hot one minute, then they be cold the next minute, and then they be lukewarm. Like
that kind of instability breeds mistrust, and mistrust in a city like Los Angeles can be deadly. Now let's talk about the so-called setup. One of the most disturbing claims made by critics of Big U is that he tipped people off about Nipsey's location and movements. Loose Cannon's story about Big U calling too early isn't just suspicious because of timing, it suggests foreknowledge. And in the streets, foreknowledge equals involvement. To make matters worse, Nipsey's death didn't look clean cut. Even Big U himself admitted the hit didn't make sense. Why would Eric Holder confront Nipsey, argue with him, sit down for food, and then come back to kill him? Think about it. If this was a simple act of rage, why did it play out so bizarrely? Why the delays, the return trips, the strange pacing? It doesn't add up, unless of course it was orchestrated. And then there's the silence. When Nipsey died, the community cried out. But Big U's public response was cautious, almost defensive. Instead of mourning openly, he seemed more focused on pushing back against the rumors. He even referenced his documentary Hip Hop Uncovered as the place where people could find the real story.
They go check out Hip Hop Uncovered, man, they gonna see the whole story. They gonna get the whole get down. Where I am, where I'm at with the family, where I'm at with this. You know what I'm saying? What's next? But that's why I did the documentary. That's why I did it, so people can see something and they can really get the facts behind everything.
But here's the problem. When someone directs you to their own documentary instead of addressing accusations head on, it doesn't ease suspicion, it fuels it. And what about Snoop Dogg? Snoop stayed relatively quiet about the specifics, but his closeness to both Nipsey and Big U has kept his name in the mix. He mourned Nipsey publicly, sure, but the conspiracy theorists point to what they see as a lack of transparency. To them, Snoop wasn't just a grieving peer. He was part of the inner circle, the same circle that allegedly wanted Nipsey out of the way. And while there's no hard evidence tying Snoop to the planning, the fact that his name even comes up in these conversations shows how deep the mistrust runs. Let's pause here and ask the real question. What motive could there possibly be? For Big U, some argue it was about money. Nipsey had outgrown him, moved on from his management, and built his empire without cutting Big U in. That kind of separation can breed resentment, especially when millions of dollars are at stake. Others say it was about power. Nipsey's vision for community empowerment, for ownership, for rejecting gang. Beefs went against the very foundation of the street culture Big U had thrived in. Nipsey wanted to move the community forward. Some believe that threatened the old guard. And then there's the possibility that it wasn't personal at all, that Big U and Snoop were caught up in larger forces, bigger than both of them. Government surveillance, gang politics, industry manipulation. Because when a man like Nipsey gains that much influence, you can bet there are powerful people watching. Either way, the cracks between Nipsey and Big U are undeniable. He once lived in Big U's home. He once called him family. And yet, by the time of his death, their relationship was strained, unstable, and filled with mistrust. That is why the idea of Big U being involved hasn't died down, because people look at that fractured relationship, the strange phone calls, the contradictions, and they ask, could the man who helped build Nipsey also have been the one who helped tear him down? And in the next part, we'll take it even further. We'll look at the aftermath, the investigations, the public silence, and the unanswered questions that remain to this day. Because if Nipsey Hussle's death really was planned, then the truth is still out there, buried beneath layers of loyalty, fear, and silence. Why Nipsey Hussle's death still doesn't add up. By now, you can see why the conspiracy surrounding Nipsey Hussle's death refuses to disappear. The conflicts, the early phone calls, the contradictions, they all create a picture that doesn't sit right. But what really cements this story in the minds of so many is what happened after the murder, the aftermath. Because when the bullets stopped flying outside the Marathon store in Crenshaw, the questions began. And in many ways, they've never been answered. The official story is simple. Eric Holder, aka Shitty Cuz, walked up, confronted Nipsey, argued, left, came back, and pulled the trigger. Done. Case closed. But when people look closer, things didn't add up. Even Big U, as we have mentioned earlier, questioned the narrative. That doubt is enough to keep people awake at night. If it didn't make sense to him, if the hit seemed sloppy and strange, then what really happened? And then came the investigations. You'd think that with a murder of this magnitude, with an artist who had just received a letter of recognition from the President of the United States, every detail would be combed through with precision.
And this man got a letter from the president. Do you think anybody who had anything to do with that would be free?
Right. No, that's a fact.
He got a letter from Obama. That nigga got 4,000 FBI, CIA, DEAs, and whoever.
Big. You used that exact argument to defend himself, saying basically, if I was involved, do you really think I'd be walking free? And on the surface, he's right. But here's the problem. In the eyes of conspiracy theorists, that doesn't clear him. It only raises the stakes. Because if powerful forces were involved, if this was bigger than just a gang dispute, then freedom doesn't mean innocence. It means protection. Let's not forget, Nipsey was more than just an entertainer. He was aligning himself with Dr. Sebi's message of health and independence. He was talking about ownership. He was buying up real estate in his own neighborhood. He was empowering the community to dream bigger than handouts. For some, that made him a target of the streets. For others, it made him a target of the government. And in either case, the idea that people like Big U or even Snoop Dogg could have been tools in a larger machine isn't too hard for many to believe. But then there's the silence. When you look at how people responded after Nipsey's death, something feels off. Sure, there were vigils, tributes, and murals. Snoop mourned him publicly, calling his death one of the hardest losses the West Coast had ever felt. But outside of grief, where was the outrage? Where were the demands for deeper answers? Where was the insistence that the story didn't make sense? Instead, there was caution, a tiptoeing around the subject. People who once claimed to be close to Nipsey suddenly didn't want to be in the same room with Big U, even if they believed he wasn't guilty.
Because even the people who know the truth, they don't want to deal with you because they scared of what the public outcry might be. You know what I mean? Like, damn, man, we know you ain't had nothing to do with it, but you still don't want to be in a room with the person that's being accused of.
Fear, distance, silence. That was the real aftermath. And let's not forget Loose Cannon's story. 30 minutes before Nipsey was killed, he says Big U told him Nipsey was already dead. Then, when Loose Cannon panicked and called Nipsey, Nip picked up the phone, alive, breathing, unaware of what was about to happen.
I thought Big U gave wrong information. 30 minutes later, the homies blowing me up like they just killed Nipsey.
That's the kind of detail you can't just explain away, because it means someone had information they shouldn't have had. And in a case like this, timing is everything. So where does Snoop fit into all of this? That's the million-dollar question, because while there's no direct evidence tying him to the planning, his closeness to both Nipsey and Big U makes him part of the narrative whether he likes it or not. He was there when Nipsey was rising. He was connected to the same networks, the same power structures. And to conspiracy theorists, that means he couldn't not know. Add to that, Snoop's own history of navigating the industry while staying close to figures like Suge Knight. And you have a man who has always managed to balance loyalty with survival. Was he just paying respects to Nipsey, or was he carefully protecting his own image in the middle of something far bigger? At the end of the day, what keeps this story alive is the sense that something isn't right. The footage that people claim exists of Big U and Snoop talking without realizing the cameras were rolling may never see the light of day. But the whispers about it, the people swearing it's real, give just enough fuel for the conspiracy to burn forever. And when you stack that rumor on top of the contradictions in Big U's statements, the strange timing of phone calls, and the fact that Nipsey's death made no sense even to those closest to him, you get a narrative that simply won't go away. So why should you care? Because Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another rapper taken too soon. He represented something bigger: independence, ownership, and community power. And if his death was orchestrated, whether by enemies in the streets, enemies in the industry, or enemies in government, then what happened to him is a warning. It's a warning about what happens when someone dares to rise above the system that's been designed to keep them in check. And the fact that names like Big U and Snoop Dogg are even whispered in connection to that story should tell you just how messy, how dangerous, and how unresolved this tragedy really is. In the end, the truth may never fully come out. Maybe the cameras really did capture something dark. Maybe the people who know the truth are too afraid to speak. Or maybe the official story is exactly what it looks like: a personal beef turned deadly. But here's the reality. The people of Crenshaw still feel the loss. The culture still feels the void. And as long as the unanswered questions linger, so will the suspicion. Because Nipsey Hussle wasn't just killed, he was silenced. And whether Big U and Snoop Dogg had anything to do with it or not, the fact remains, someone wanted him gone. And that someone got exactly what they wanted. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen for more content.